thought today I'd talk about Codex. Have you heard about Codex before from OpenAI? I feel like
Uh,
we've been down this path before.
yeah, we've talked about Codex or
Okay.
some version of Codex. I think there's a lot of different, I don't know, terms out there. That there's that word being used, I think, in several ways out there. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Now, similar to, I think, when I think of Copilot, it seems to apply to a bunch of things. So OpenAI released the Codex app. So imagine like a desktop app similar to Anthropic's Claude app that runs
Mm,
on Mac only.
mhm.
And I think that so there's many codexes out there. The other one that I've played with before would be the Codex CLI or maybe the Codex LLM model. So those two for me are things that I use honestly day to day. I use the Codex CLI quite a bit, and I also use the Codex coding model quite a bit. Now this is a little bit different than both of those in that it's both of those things together on the desktop. And I think the main push of this app if I'm using it. So there's a web page, there's an article you can look at, that kind of thing. There's a preview of what it looks like. But I think what I talk about is how I use it myself. So if I can find this screen here, just one moment. So this is the Codex app. Now, I'll make this a little bit easier to read. I realize this font's a little bit small. It's a window within a window, etc. But on the left-hand side, what I wanted to talk about are these sessions here. So for people like me or you who are using Codex already, some of these sessions, in my case, predate the launch of this app. So what it will do is grab older Codex CLI sessions that you have within this repo. I'm trying not to talk so I'm out of breath this time because last time I was so excited I was trying to catch my breath the whole time. But in this case, what you want to do is when you're looking at these old sessions that have happened, you can actually see what you were using Codex CLI for. And in fact, because we're in a Git repo, I can continue that work, which I thought was invaluable. So just a quick little point there. The other thing is in Codex is you can have multiple workspaces. So in this case, I've got this GT workspace. This is Gastown, very similar to the last episode we talked about. So I'm running Gastown, just trying to see if I can make it a little bit different, make it mine, make my own gas town, if you will. Maybe it's an electric town or something like that. Who knows? But if I'm forking this and making something new, I might have many sessions that are working on different things. In this case, a lot of it is just poking and prodding Gastown to do the work on its own. But we could do things like fix automation or make sure that they're both working, looking at GitHub, etc. So I'm going to pop out of the screen a little bit because I feel like this is a little bit smaller. So let's talk about that new experience. So one, if you've got older repos that are running in it, when you open it up for the first time, you'll see them. And that's what I was trying to show on the left-hand side. So in this case, there's not too much in here, but you can see that I've done this 2 months ago. So I was working on this project here. Now, what you do is when you create a new project, it will ask you which folder you want to go into. And we'll talk about those settings right now. So in this case, I've got this vibe coding folder set up. But if we go into a general config, I think there's a lot of things in here that I want to touch on. This won't be a really long video, but we're going to talk about capabilities a little bit because I think in this app, there are some capabilities that I thought were great that I'd like to see in others. And I feel like as we start releasing more and more IDEs or developer tools, that these become more commonplace. So when I think about a developer environment these days, I might not be thinking about an interactive development environment. So I might be thinking about like a chat session or like a steering session. It almost feels like I'm a chair on a steering committee and that there's other agents work with me. So like an agentic engineer kind of workflow. So we're all part and parcel part of this one team. As such, though, because sometimes you do need an ID and you need to pop out to it, I thought it was really neat that there was a pop out here so you could pick your own IDE. And in fact, I thought the ones that came up as installed on my end were interesting choices. So there's Cursor, VS Code, Windsurf, Anti-Gravity I thought was interesting, but also there's the terminal, my iTerm too that I had installed, as well as Ghosty. So places that I would go to dev. And at the very bottom of the list, I think there's Xcode, which in fact in this session it did open up, which I thought was pretty interesting because it wanted to do a Swift build. Okay, so open in IDE. There are a lot of, I guess, modern choices in my mind on here, which I thought was cool. The other is the thread detail. And this is something that I would love to see in Claude Code, like the verbosity, allowing me to change and update the verbosity, maybe not globally, but per session would be pretty interesting. The other in here, and I don't know if you've seen me do this before, but I've essentially got a way to like click my mouse sometimes to keep things alive or on Mac, you can run Caffeinate, but a lot of times I find my computer will sleep and then things will stop that we're running because I'm not really moving the mouse or touching the keyboard, but I am watching the screen, and that's important. It's an important distinction. So I thought these settings were kind of interesting for me. Now, there's a lot of other things in here. We can do dark mode, as we saw in the other one, if we want to, or light, or follow the system. The other is if you don't like the transparent background, you can turn that off. So I think that covers most of the like nice to have sort of things. One thing we noticed before streaming is that we can't make this font any bigger. In fact, if you're just using Command or Control Plus, there's a certain size that you can go to until the kerning kind of gets all out of whack. So 2424 seems to be the biggest that I've noticed will actually work if you need something a little bit bigger. Maybe you're running this from your couch in TV mode. Okay, sorry, we're almost on the settings. I know these aren't really exciting, but I do find them pretty interesting because it is a different app. The other is in terms of notifications, you can do it so it's only when focused, which I think is key because I don't always want to know when something's happening if I'm in another app. Let's say you and I are doing a recording or on a Zoom or something else that's taking my attention and the app doesn't have focus. I actually don't want to get those alerts because I can't look at it right now. So I don't want to be there. Anyway, easy settings. I've got one more quick one in here. Now, this is kind of silly, maybe trivial, sorry, but I thought it was interesting. If I go into open source licenses and scroll down a little bit, there's a license in here that I thought was pretty cool. Let's see if I can find it. Sorry, there's a lot of licenses in here. Okay, I think it's this one right here, the next one. So basically what happened was I noticed in here, I was going through the licenses, that there's Orchestrion from Datadog, which I thought was pretty interesting. I'm sorry, I can't seem to find it here because the text is scrolled a little bit too, or a little bit too big, but I think it's right around here, at any rate. So it was this package here. My apologies. Oh, I can't even find it anymore. I'm so sorry. At any rate, Orchestrion was in here, which I thought was amazing. Okay, so orchestration codecs. Okay, so let's go into this a little bit more. So we're into config. We're talking about open source license. We found a nice little, I don't know, like a Easter egg, I guess, for me in here. The other is in terms of personalization, I thought this was really nice, and I'd like to see it everywhere as well. So friendly is the default, and I found that there were a lot of emojis and exclamation points and things like that. I found swapping this to Pragmatic, I think is more along the lines of how I would normally have a conversation, but also, maybe more importantly, it feels like there's less output tokens, which is nice. I don't need verbosity when I'm working with the models. And again, I feel like if Codex CLI had this option, I would like that as well. Okay, lastly, we've got MCP servers. Now, I've got Playwright turned on, and on the other box, I think I was using sequential thinking, but if you want to add MCP servers, you can. The other is, though, in the skills. So let's assume that we've got Playwright turned on. We can also turn on the Atlas skill to then use as a web browser to browse things that we're making, which is fantastic. Now, I apologize so much. There's a typo in here. I did, in fact, add this Datadog skill, but I swear to you, I didn't misspell this, like the repo name. And it seems to be just on Codex app, funnily enough, because everywhere else I use this name isn't like that. So I feel like they might have grabbed it from the official repo or something like that. At any rate, apologies. I am using the skill, but this is definitely not the right way to write Datadog. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm almost done here. So Git, one of the things that it will do, which is maybe bad depending on how you work, is it will try to work in work trees. Now, that's fine for one agent working on one thing, but when you've got 8 or 10 agents all working in work trees and you start from the same point, generally it means you have to create branches and then work trees because I think you can't have more than one snapshot point in time for a work tree for the same commit. So you end up creating branches and then work trees, which leaves you into a weird problem where you're working on a branch, but another agent's on a different branch and they can't really collaborate. So I thought that was a bit of a pain, actually, was a work tree functionality. And I ended up doing, I guess you could say trunk development, but I put everybody on main and had them all coordinate between each other. Was the first issue I had in terms of this. There is a prefix. So when you make the branch and then when you go to push it, you can tell where it came from. So provenance or lineage isn't that difficult, but it is a caveat. So it is a little bit different than the way you might be using work trees right now, for example. All right, almost done. Now, this project is one that I added. You can add multiple projects if you want to. They'll come up as a little folder on the left-hand side, so you can organize all your sessions onto there, no problem at all. And then the work trees that we talked about, there's none in this repo for now, but if you wanted to go through and prune them, you could. And then archive threads in case you got older threads. Okay, so day to day, what you'll probably be using is just going into one of these and opening up sessions. But I thought the automations were very, very powerful. So I think all of this, it's great. There's an IDE that's not an IDE. It's a development environment. There's a shell. I'll show you the shell in a moment, as well as integration into editor tools. All that stuff is great, but I think in this era of skills or MCP servers, we're looking for something more. What else can you do? Like, do you need me? Do I need to do I need to be involved in this process at all? Can I hand this off? Can I hand some of this off to you? What can you do for me that's a little bit extra than other agents as opposed to CLIs or IDEs? Like, what is, if this is an agentic tool, what else can it do? Now, the one that I'm using on that other machine is essentially just a cron job. So imagine a schedule that can go through on a regular basis and do something. Now, there are a few others in here. So imagine this one says summarize yesterday's Git activity for stand up. So imagine you start your day with a stand up. You and your agents start a stand up to see what happened overnight. Sounds silly, is actually something I currently do when I wake up. If an agent was running overnight, I need to know what it did. Like, how many credentials did you leak, or what else did you do? I got to know. I feel like a lot of these are really good starter points for what you might want to do on a regular basis. And in fact, if you just want to create a new one, so we'll create a new automation here, you can actually just say like what you're going to do. So Gastown is what I was working on, for example. We'll choose this folder, and then the prompt is going to be, is Gastown running? Something like that. And these can be, the reason I think these are kind of interesting is that they can be open forms. So I can just say like is the project building or what have you, and the model will figure it out and apply the correct action. Now you saw a bunch of those sessions in the other one I was looking at. If we go back here, so these are all running on 1 hour intervals, and you can see what they're doing. Some of them go a little bit further, some of them don't. But as they go through, you'll see the sessions in there. Now, a word of caution about this. This could be because it's new, what have you. I ran into a few issues with the automations. One is it would pick a model that doesn't exist, or when it spawned the session, the model existed. And when I would go back to look at the session, it would say that the model didn't apply to Codex. So that's one of them. The other is if you just put a prompt in here like continue or do it all or do the next thing, you actually may get some errors from the API saying that you've like it's invalid according to the terms of service. So there are some things in there, and in particular, just to note the keywords that I found, do it all, I found was interesting. Continue is the other one. I think because it's like an IDE, like a command line IDE, maybe that was the issue, because the other two that were problematic were Olama, Llama, and Quen, because I was trying to move things off to open code with Open Router, just trying some free models. Those ones seem to bring the ire, I guess, of the API, not allowed to be continue. So there are a couple protected words in here. And I think the reason for that is because at the moment, this is half the token usage if you went and just use Codex CLI. And they might think people are trying to game the system by using it. And in fact, I think most of us, if tokens are half off, will go to where they are just to see how it works. All right, and the rest is like a schedule. You can do it on an interval if you want. And in my case, it will go down to only 1 here. So you can't use 0.5, for example. You just go back to 1. And if you do 1.5, it'll go to 2, for example. So it's only whole numbers. And I did every 1 hour, which is as fast as you can do it. And that's perfectly fine for Gastown. Now, okay, so we talked about automations, skills, MCP, and intervals. And I'm not saying we're Gastown ready, but that's almost like a quote unquote Gastown. So like an orchestrator, basically. So in my mind, there's a lot of primitives in here where you could build your own little farm of agents, what have you. But the only thing that I noticed in here that's a little bit of a problem is as you're going through these sessions, a lot of your work is going to be clicking on these and then just scrolling down to the bottom and then just typing something else. I think this paradigm is good, but it feels like when we were talking about Gastown, there's sort of the 1 to 8 levels, and I think this might be level 6. So if you're currently in a situation where you're managing 5 terminals, this may be a little bit easier than that for you. But if you're past that already and you're managing 10, which is what I got here, 10 or more, or you're into the ones where you can't count, like there's 160 terminals in Tmux, something like that. This is not the app for you. This might be that overseer app that can run those things for you, but this is definitely not the one that will manage more than 10 sessions. I think the left-hand side kind of gets crowded around 10. Okay, so all this to say, there's some really nice features in this app. The tokens are cheap. It's got some great additions. I think having skills, MCP and automations really make this a little bit differentiated than other platforms. And it does start to feel like an agent once you can do things like that. Okay, that was a whirlwind tour. I do like the tool. I used it all since it was launched yesterday, I think. So I used it for almost a whole day at this point in time. I did find clicking back and forth between the sessions was a chore. Ideally, I'd have something else managing that, but I did find being able to hook into other OpenAI apps, as well as doing things like image gen on the command line. They've got I think it's called Yeet, for example, that will just like drop everything, throw the code to GitHub, which is pretty handy actually, because a lot of times I'll be, I got to swap computers and I got to get things out there and then continue working somewhere else. I think some of those automation and skills that come included essentially are really handy. Phew, that was a lot. Hopefully I breathed a little bit more this time than last stream.
Yeah, no, that was great. I had a question I think you just partially answered for me. I noticed in the prompt before you put in check in on Gastown, it used either a variable or some sort of indicator, and I couldn't tell if that was a variable towards some other app, a
Right.
tool. It was Sentry, I believe, is what it shows. Um, and I'm
It
just
does in
curious
fact see I
if
did
you've
not see that. Good point. I have
yeah.
not used
It
these variables
So that
at all.
makes me think
Good call.
it's a tool call. Have
It
you
does
had a
look like a
chance to
tool call.
experiment with that at all? Do you know anything? Yeah.
I have not, and I do have a skill, Datadog spelled the wrong way, that I can use here as well, so maybe that's what I'll try out from now, but it
Hmm.
does in fact look like a skill because I did notice the sentry
Mhm.
skill
Mhm.
in the list. Yeah, there's linear sentry and a few other the sort of notable new tools.
Okay. Okay, cool. And so just I guess it feels a little bit like, maybe somewhat more approachable tool than Codex CLI for depending on the audience, but for the most part, the same functionality. So
You got it.
pretty
I think the
pretty close.
main thing yeah, I think the main thing that will be different is when you paste in Codex CLI. Actually, maybe people don't even know this. You can hit Control V on Mac and Control V in Cloud Code as well to paste an image, but you can't tell what you pasted. So you might paste the wrong image if it's in your clipboard.
Mhm.
The big
Mhm.
difference here is when you paste an image, you can actually see it. You can click on the preview and see it. So there's things in this that are a little bit easier. You can drag and drop, for example. It's got that kind of GUI niceties. Also in Cloud Code and in Codex CLI. Sometimes emojis can be a little bit weird, that kind of thing. I think that's for the most part in terms of text parsing, it's pretty good. Aside from the UE, I like the UI itself. Like the GUI does have a font max, as we found, 24. But otherwise, yeah, it's actually quite nice. I think the main thing is that some people don't like the terminal. I hate to be that guy. I love the terminal, but there are people who really don't like black terminal, green font, that kind of thing. They think they're in hacker mode or what have you,
Mhm.
and this might actually assuage some of that concerns. Of course, it does have a terminal that I didn't show off at all. My apologies. We'll pull it up here. It's on the top right. There's a terminal down here.
Okay.
It's not bad as a terminal, but it's not great. It also has a differ. The differ can't handle like 1,000 changes. So not to say that that's a good thing. It's actually a bad thing. Sometimes these projects have way too many, but I think being aware of the type of diff that you get from a project that's vibe coded is probably better. Is just being able to show like really long diffs, hundreds of diffs, thousands of diffs, not just one or two. I think is pretty handy for a vibe coded app.
Mhm. Cool. All right. Well, Ryan, appreciate that. And yeah, we can't wait to see the next thing you got for us. So we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye.